Do you like ghost stories? I hope so. My name is Lawrence, a husband and a father. In life, I was a professor of religious literature and history. If I was still alive, I guess I'd still be all of those things. But I'm not. I'm dead. Like I said, ghost story. Believe me, I never imagined I'd be here, helping others heal in the afterlife. So where is here? This is the scene. It's the middle place where souls must confront the traumas of their past. Here I lead souls away from their demons that haunt them. I must also defend these lost souls from others who would prey on them. To do this, I use the power of the Staff of Truth to help them break free. It isn't easy. Clearly, they need help and hope, and that's where I come in. I am a guide of souls. I'm the shepherd.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sew Much Cosplay show here on The Experience. I am your host, sewing teacher, cosplayer, wearer of many hats, Cheryl Whited, and welcome to our show. Yay, I'm so excited. Happy Friday. It is it's a cold kind of spring-like day today. It's in the 60s. That's why I've got my little sweatshirt on. It's kind of chilly. So what has been going on in the world of cosplay? I don't know if you have heard that there are still some online cosplay championships and challenges, and a big one is coming up on May 15th. It is called the Ultimate Cosplay Championship. And while the entries have already closed for that championship, the people who have been selected for that show, and you can watch all of the people who have made it to the semifinals on May 15th. So that is just another week from now, and we will be able to watch the Ultimate Cosplay Championship. Now, the cool thing about that one is they did have that last year, and this year they're also virtual as well. But the shows that are happening this fall, including many of the shows for the I guess you would call them the promoter, Reed Pop. Now, Reed Pop is known for New York Comic Con, Emerald City Comic Con, and C2E2 in Chicago. So they have their own championship that they have developed, and that one is called the Crown Championships of Cosplay. Now, because Reed Pop does many conventions around the world, when they do conventions in various cities in other countries, they actually crown a champion in places like Australia and Thailand and all sorts of crazy places around the world. And then those winners all end up coming to the United States at the C2E2 show in Chicago. And they have the main crown championship there amongst all of the winners. One person in the world is crowned the overall crown championship winner. And the crown championship is wild. They are some of the best cosplays that you'll see. If you haven't checked out the Ultimate Cosplay Championship, I believe the website is ultimatecosplay.com. That particular championship is also very very high end, and so it makes me feel very inadequate, but I really don't try to take that too personally. These are just people who are extremely dedicated, and they have done an awful lot in order to get their skills to where they need to. But if you haven't checked out any of those championships, you should, because they will definitely inspire you to make some really cool cosplay. I'm very excited that it looks like we will be turning to conventions again. I know that in the sewing convention world, which I know for some of you might not think is as exciting as the Comic Cons, but the sewing conventions are going back into play starting in June. And I'm already booked to teach cosplay at a show in Chicago, in Cleveland, in Raleigh. So there are a lot of cosplay classes that you can take from me. I bet the sewing conventions are a great time. I can tell you that there's much more after party stuff going on at a comic book convention than there are at the sewing conventions. But some of those quilting and sewing ladies, they know how to party. So you do have to watch out for those ladies. They bring their own booze and booze it up all night. So anyway, I am still working today on our Noob Cybot cosplay. This is the mask from the original character Noob Cybot. This is from Mortal Kombat back in the day. So this is very you are so coming to one of those cons. I bet you would. And I think you would have a great time. So we are working on this costume, specifically on building this mask. And I'm going to switch now to my other cam so you can get a look at what is going on here. But what we have is what we've been building over the last couple of weeks. So if you have been watching the show, you've been able to see us build this mask over the past couple of weeks. And I'm doing a lot of explaining as I go. So for you at home, you probably won't take nearly as long as it does for me to make it and having to explain it to you along the way. But we have started out. For those of you who are just joining me and don't know the last 2 weeks worth of creation on this particular costume, let's remind you what we are making. And that is just this mask portion here for this character from Mortal Kombat. Now, Noob Cybot was an unplayable character in the original Mortal Kombat, and is now, you can play him. He is one of the original ninja characters from Mortal Kombat. And you can see that he has the same sort of mask as they all did back then, as Sub-Zero, as Scorpion, which are the two main characters that were in the new Mortal Kombat movie. But Noob Cybot himself does not appear. And for those of you that don't know, Noob Cybot is the reversed names of Boone and Tobias, who were the two guys who created Mortal Kombat. Okay, so that's why his name is Noob Cybot. This is the mask that we are making. This is the pattern that we're making, and it is from a Pepakura website. So Pepakura, if you would just Google the word Pepakura, what that is a Japanese word for paper modeling. And this is half. This is only half of a paper model. And I did only half of the paper model just to see like where the pieces go and how this mask goes together, so that when I actually make this out of foam, that I know where what pieces are which. And this also allowed me to make notes on the paper version in places like right side versus left side, what size millimeter foam I wanted to make this out of. So on this nose piece, I knew I wanted to make that out of 5 millimeter, the center out of 5 millimeter, and this interior cheek portion 2 millimeter. Now I am just using the Pepakura model, the paper model, as a guideline for me to create this mask, because um, I do have to make changes to the model as I go, because I'm, instead of making it out of super thin pieces of paper, we're actually making it out of thicker, more durable foam pieces. And that means that we have some adjusting to do to this paper, so that we could eliminate some functions and we have to add in others. And so for the first two sections of how to make, to get to this point, you're going to want to go back and watch our previous two episodes from the last two Fridays. And that will get you to this stage right here. And so that was my rather long-winded way to say that we are going to start to carry on now with the rest of this costume, or this one mask piece. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put aside these pieces, but I am going to point out one of them to you. And that is this piece right here. So this piece, when you create it out of the paper, it actually has a little section here that folds backwards to create the depth and the pointiness. I guess that would be the word. I don't know, pointiness might not be a word, but here in this corner of the mask where it comes down, and you'll be able to see that here on our two photo reference pieces. So this is actually completed Pepakura mask, and this has actually been painted over with an epoxy resin over the paper. So while it looks like it's made of foam, it is actually not made of foam. It's still made of paper. So this down here on these pointy chin parts, that is the part that we are paying close attention to with this portion right here. And here in our photo reference from the actual character from the game, you can see that they are very pronounced for that section there. Okay, so you can see that they do come down below the chin, and so that is something that we need to pay attention to on our finished piece. So here is this tiny paper sliver, and if you look at it, it's probably no wider than 1/4 of an inch, maybe less than 1/4 of an inch, maybe even 1/8 of an inch, which for the most part, we could have assumed that the thickness of this foam would give us that gap, and we could almost have had to eliminate this piece altogether from this nose area. Okay, now when you look at the original the paper version, the paper pattern, it fits directly into that paper spot here. I'm just going to lower this down just a little bit. We can get in closer here. So if you see here, that paper, this fits when you have that bridge in place, this little sliver paper bridge. Without that bridge in place, what happens is this doesn't fit into this section unless you do have that bridge. So initially I thought I would be able to eliminate it because when I cut my piece out of foam, but then I get here and I realize there is just too much gap here and here for that to work properly. But what we do have is the proper chin and the proper drop on the bottom here where we have that chin coming down from the edge. So we don't need to add this part. We already have that from our actual foam, but we do actually need to use this paper bridge portion. So I have already, through the magic of television here, I've already cut that out, and we can already see that this makes a much better fit for this piece. Now, of course, if I'm holding it all apart, you can see it still doesn't look like it fits, but when we bring these parts closer together in the way that it would be fitting around your face, you can see that the gaps that we initially had are closed. Obviously, this is not glued together yet, but we're going to get there. The other situation, though, is that this is still just a hair, just a tiny hair too small to fit inside of here. You can see that when I lay it down, it's just a tiny bit too small. Now, that's just the difference between us coming from these paper versions and us working with foam. And so what I did was I cut this piece a second time. And what I did was I gave myself a little bit more room around the drawing instead of cutting. And when we do cut these pieces, we do cut on the interior of our drawn line. And when we draw, remember, we're using a silver colored Sharpie. And when we draw around our paper pieces, we have to remember that the edge is on the interior of your drawn line. So cutting that out just did not give us enough room to glue these pieces in properly. It's almost like we just needed a hair more room so that this piece can be glued, and it needs to be raised up just slightly like that. And then we're actually going to be cutting these bottom pieces off because on our paper version, remember, these are folded underneath and help create that pointy chin area. So we don't need that. We have that thickness on our actual piece. We don't need that. But I'm not going to cut it until we actually get to the final piece. So this is now our piece that was our original. It was cut to the size that it needed to be of the paper, but we now know that that is just slightly too small. So I have gone in and I'm putting that in my trash pile so I don't accidentally use it. And we have this new piece that you can see just has a little bit more extra around the various pattern. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use this extra to be glued underneath. And that's going to help close those gaps and keep these two pieces on the right track. And actually, you can see how nicely they line up with the markings, so we know we're doing this in the right spot. So that's where we're going to start. And we're going to start with that glue. My favorite, as you know, the glue that is extremely smelly. Now, again, I'm working in a well ventilated warehouse space or studio space, you will be doing this with not just well ventilated space, but also um, with a respirator if you can. My friends, I just can't stress that enough every time I talk about this with you. This stuff, the fumes of this is really, really strong. And I, this week, my husband and I made sure that the glue was openable, unlike last week, where we had uh, fun, a fun, entertaining time trying to get the glue open. Okay, so here again, I've got some on my fingers. I'm not going to recommend that you do that because let me tell you, this stuff is really, really difficult to get off of your fingers. It is not like rubber cement. I know I say that every time, but that's just to remind you how terrible this stuff can be. So just on those little spots there where we have the drawn line is where I'm going to try to brush this glue. And remember the rules for contact cement. Both sides need to have a little bit of the glue, and that is how this will stick together. It does not stick together unless both sides have glue. Now you can see that I have painted the glue onto there, and we're going to do that. And we just need to make sure that we remember that we're doing it at a certain spot on this underside. And we know if it looks reversed, that's because it is. We do not want this we want this glue to dry, and we don't want it to get little pools of it, or puddles as I like to call them. And it's really just going to be sticking in these couple of places. So we just need to make sure that we get some glue on there. Now I'm going to just double check down here on the bottom of this piece because it does not look like I got enough on there. And it is a super stringy glue. That is very much like rubber cement, but man, this stuff is really smelly. It is pretty strong. And so I always get concerned for my students whenever I'm teaching this as a class. We always wear respirators. I have everybody bring a respirator. They're very inexpensive respirators. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, they got very hard to find for a while because everyone was using respirators to fight COVID. And I mean, I don't think a respirator is really going to do a whole lot for you in fighting COVID, but it is definitely going to help you if you have any fumes from this kind of stuff. So I'm just using my armor snips. These are the Sew Much Cosplay awesome armor snips. They have our logo right on them. I'm just using that to cut myself a little scrap of this foam, and I'm going to use this scrap to even out any kind of puddles that may have formed on either one of these pieces. So when you shine it in the light and you tilt it, sometimes you're able to see where the glue is still wet, and that will help you just take these spare pieces and help spread that glue around so that they don't puddle up. And now remember, and I know I've said this in the last 2 episodes, and I'll say it again here, this is a one and done stick. Note it's not sticking to the paper because the paper doesn't have the other side of the glue on it. And so what we're trying to do is just make sure that we are doing a very careful job of lining up exactly where this needs to go. And when you press it down, that's it. It is stuck. And what we're doing is we do have to push a little bit here to manipulate the glue and the pieces to line up properly with the registration marks. So here, there's registration marks, and then there's registration marks that we transferred from our paper onto here. And so we're just making sure that those line up. And notice, like, this glue just barely touches itself and it is stuck. And there we go. So now we have this side down, and what we need to do is to glue this side. Now I felt like this was just easier to stick one side and not have the accidental capability of this coming over and getting stuck to my piece. So we're just going to keep this glue train going. This is, again, from a building perspective, this is just how these things get made. And I think, some of these techniques, it is a matter of just, seeing how other people do it. And for me, because I'm not the kind of person that can look at something as dimensional as this mask. Now, if this were, a costume or something, I could probably look at it and figure out how to sew it. But when it comes to having the ability to create it 3D and out of something, that resembles metal or plastic, I don't, that just feels like that's not my skill wheelhouse. And so for me, I need something like a pepakura pattern to follow. And what's really awesome is there's so many pepakura cosplay options out there. There's a million masks. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard. You really just have to look at what's out there and determine if you think that it would translate to foam, and so on. And like I said before, I've seen people make pepakura Iron Man full suits of armor. So there's quite a bit that you can do with those pepakura patterns. So what we're doing is, again, we're looking for that shininess to just dull. And that's how we know that this particular glue has is set. You can see here, I'm already using this on this sort of shiny area here. It's still wet. And we want to spread that out so that it is not, so that when we push these two pieces together, they'll stick. Now, again, you want to be very careful, because if they accidentally touch, then they're going to be stuck. So we're trying to make this happen on our own, at our own making, not accidentally. Okay, so I'm just setting this top edge down, and then I'm carefully lining up these marks and pressing that together. And that glue is set just like that. I love it. Okay, so now we have added this additional ridge into this piece, which will much easier will be much easier to put this into the mask portion. And that is what we are going to do here next. So what I will do is show you how these two pieces come together when we come back from our break. Hello, hello, welcome back, my friends. That I was watching that commercial for Scout Comics, and I thought, well, there's some fun cosplay ideas in that one. So, um, you just never know where you're gonna get inspired, and so I thought that was really cool. Maybe we will work on one of those in the future. So we are now ready on our noob Cybot mask to insert that breathing apparatus, I guess you would call it, into the front of the mask. So let's switch over here and get a look at how we're going to do that. And what's interesting here, is that the foam of this mask, sometimes you can see that it wants to close in on itself, but don't worry because you can apply a little bit of heat, and that will allow you to um, fix any of those kinds of that memory issue where the foam wants to do what it wants to do. And we've had now a few moments for this glue to really solidify, and we're able to see that these pieces are really, really stuck. They are not coming undone. And that's what we want. We want this prop that we're making to really do what it needs to do. So, one of the things that we've talked about in previous episodes, and I'm going to talk about here briefly again, is that these inner sides, in order for this to fit nicely, we would have wanted these two pieces to have been beveled. And for me to do that, you would take your armor snips, and you can cut just here on the inside these edges so that they are beveled. And I'm going to show you here on the back side where you can see that beveling has already been done. Now, for small pieces, like right in here in the nose bridge area, first of all, don't be afraid to go ahead and really, wing this open if you need to. You can see I'm really kind of flexing the material, and I've actually used a very small pair of scissor. Make sure these are not your fabric scissors. These are going to be scissors that you use just for foam, because the foam is really, really hard on your material. But if you do have a little section here that the big snips can't get, you can come in with your small scissors and trim that away. Now, I have seen people use a Dremel to Dremel all this down and sand this down. But you can do it without that. You can do it with a pair of scissors or snips. Okay, so now we just need to put the glue around here. And again, like the last piece, I'm actually going to do half at a time. And the reason for that is because it gives me just more control over the process. So I'm going to do this in two parts. And, again, like I said, what I don't want to do is lay this down and accidentally have one half touch the other, or stick together in a place that I don't want it to. That is definitely something I have done before. So that would be one of those, like, ask me how I know functions. And so I'm laying all this glue down. You can see it is kind of globby in spots, and so that's where we're going to use our little scrap piece to help get that piece set. So we're also then going to just put the glue on the back side here, and you can also see that on this piece as well, I have beveled that edge. And I did that before I glued these two pieces together. And so that beveled edge was already there. And it is kind of stringy, nasty glue. And it sometimes will, like this little applicator, if you buy the bottle of contact cement with the applicator, sometimes this little applicator wants to come out of the, um, you know, just disconnect itself from the thing here. So sometimes I have to get my hands a little bit dirty to get that applicator back in the cap. But what we're doing here is we're just making sure that we add the glue. We want to make sure that we get all of the edges in particular. We do want these two pieces to be very sealed next to each other. So that's why we're making sure that we're getting that brushed edge. Now again, this is wet. You can see that all that shininess, that's going to disappear as we, and again, I'm just making sure that the edge is got a coating on the other side. All right, so now we can take our little scrap piece. And again, we're just looking for anywhere that there are just larger puddles. And we're taking that scrap piece, sometimes flipping it over so that you're not putting the glued side back into more glue. You'll stick those two pieces together accidentally. Again, that's another ask me how I know. And you know, this will be very close. We will be very close to finishing this mask up. You know, to the point where we would just need to paint and do that. Okay, so now we are going to very carefully stick these two together. Now, when I go from the front, when you're working with something that has an obvious front to it, like this mask, what you're doing is you're trying to make sure that you line this edge up first with exactly where it needs to go. And here's where, you know, we want to be very careful where we stick this glue. And then you're just going to nudge those two pieces together. And you know, it's delicate work. But here's where we just want to be careful with the edge because we don't want to it sticks pretty quickly and pretty permanently, so we don't want to undo our good work. All right, and so again, because these are beveled, we just want to make sure these pieces are stuck together. We're squeezing that with our finger just to get that nice and solidly down. All right, and now we're ready for glue on the other side. Now remember, these little pieces down here are going to get trimmed off. So we do not need to worry about that little guy. That will all get taken care of. But what we're going to have to do to add this glue in here is we're really going to have to, you know, wing this open because you do have more of a chance of all of this accidentally touching, and we don't want to glue it to itself before we are ready. So we're just going to, I'm laying this down on the table and getting that glue right into that corner as well. And then you can see it's very gloppy. Is that a word? Is gloppy a word? Sometimes I don't even know. Yes, cosplay. He gives you a whole new vocabulary. Now, this is where I do want these two pieces to stay apart because I don't want them to accidentally glue to each other before I am ready. So we just have to keep one of our fingers, keeping them at a distance here while the other one is doing the work of putting the glue down. But you can see that, you know, the springiness of the foam, it wants to return to that spot. So, all right, so now we're just looking for those super high shine, and we're going to take our, just make sure to keep these two separated, and we're going to take this and just get some of that excess glue out of our way. Spread it around so it can dry. And that's the contact part of contact cement. Now I do see a little piece of, so you see that little hair there, it's not really a hair, it's just a piece of the foam that's not been snipped. And we're just going to take our scissors and snip that away. Now what we're going to have to do is make sure that we clean these scissors really well before we are done. Just giving that a little air time to dry, so you can see the foam is, or the glue is starting to dry. We just have that little spot there and another spot over here, and these are almost ready to go. So this is creating again that gap that we needed, that excess gap that closed up the hole that we had for ourselves. And what we're doing is, again, we're trying to make sure that the corner goes into place, but I also want the front edge to be lined up as closely as possible. And this is just going to take a little bit of strong arming it. There we go. Strong arming that into place. And here we go on the side. Now don't worry if you have a little small area that, looks like a gap. It's, oh no, now I've got to redo the whole thing. You don't have to. Any kinds of gaps like these, if you can't just push them together, or you can't get more glue in there to glue those two sides together, there is a way to fill that in. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode when we talk about that gap filling and painting. Okay, so we do have, it looks like all of this pretty sealed and folded down. And that is awesome. So again, if you remember, these are little portions that in the paper version, I'm just going to fold it back as if this were the paper version. But in the paper version, you would flip these sort of upside down and around, and they kind of come underneath the mask. We don't need that for this. And so we are able to trim these off and keep and create that long edge. And again, I'm just doing this with the scissors because it will probably just be much more accurate than me using the big snips. And it allows me to give it a little trim haircut there. And so we have one side. And we want really, really to make these two even. And so we just need to trim that like that. And if you need to, sometimes you just got to give the other side a haircut because it isn't the same length. This is one of those sort of dangerous things, because if you've ever tried to give yourself your own haircut, you run the risk of having over trimming one side and then having to go and trim again on the other side. And then you're in this never ending back and forth battle of over cutting one side and the other. So just be careful that you don't fall into that kind of trap. Now, what you can see here is that this area here didn't have enough glue on one side or the other. But I am going to fix that before the painting stage. So this gap here, you can see it's not as closely sealed as that side, but we will be able to fix that before the end of this process. So the other thing is we can come back and trim the chin area of this nose area, breathe area. I don't know what you would even call this. But we're just going to use our scissors, our little tiny scissors, to come in and trim that so that it is even on both sides. Okay, so now we have our nose bridge, and when we look at the character, there's one more detail, and that is right here, right under the eye and the nose. You can see that there's more of a lip. I guess you would call it a lip. Right now, our mask would go straight up against our face with this section here. And that gap, this area here, allows the mask to sit out and more prominently away from the face. So we need to do that with the piece that comes in the peppercorn pattern. Now, it is here. It is in the pattern, which is awesome. And you can see here that this small little bridge of thin, I would say that this is about a quarter of an inch wide. So what we need to do is to cut that piece out, and we do have that in our pattern. We have that in already cut onto our foam, and here it is. Now, initially, here's the difficult part of this particular piece. So ignore this other one over here, because this was for the nose bridge area, which the thickness of the foam helped us where we didn't need this piece. But this piece here is that paper nose bridge area. Okay, so if we look, and I only cut 1/2 of it out and did only 1/2 for the original. But as you can see, it starts here with the nose and goes up and around, and then this portion would, curl around this way. So we may not need all of this, okay, because this does need to sit out from the face. So this is just another way of looking at this. Again, these are the 3-dimensional issues with props. You can see that it gives you this dimensional area, but we have some of this dimensional area because of the thickness of the foam. So for a lot of this section, we don't need to add it. It looks like we only need to add it here along the top. And so from our pattern piece, which is a really long pattern piece, we only need perhaps up to this top curve. And then we can stop, and then we can trim off any of this excess that is not even here. Okay, so we just need to cut from here to here and from this side to this side, and then we will have this piece that goes on our foam, and it will be pretty straightforward. So this will be the last section that we need. Now I'm just going to wing these. I'm just going to cut these sections out so that it's easier for me to cut. And remember, when you're using your awesome armor snips, that you have your your safety closure on the bottom. You don't want to be cutting with it on this side because then your snips don't close. You always want that safety latch on the bottom. So here, once again, remember that we are using the interior of your drawn line. So if you're wondering where do I cut, you want to cut on the interior of the line, and you want that to be your guideline for where you take your snips. And you will notice that this is a fairly easy trim. And the beautiful thing I love about our armor snips is that you actually, the scissor cutting action is so much easier to use on your hands, on your, just everything is just so much easier to use when with the cutting motion versus using, X-Acto knives or what have you. So once again, we're just coming in to this area and we're giving it that cut. And I am trying to angle this because these pieces will be going up against the foam on the other side. So I'm going to try to give that angle so I don't have to recut it with an additional angle. So that should be enough there on this piece. Now it does have a nose bridge area that we do need to look at. And it looks like we should angle this piece right here. It's been cut straight across. And so what we need is for it to be on an angle as well. So yeah, I'll just do this with the smaller ones because it's just easier. And what I'm trying to do is cut that angle. I mean, I would say it's close to a 45-degree angle, if you can consider that. Just be careful you don't pop open any of your seams. That would be pretty sad. And you do want to just make sure that you're not making like a hack job of this foam here. And this side here, I find it easier to keep cutting in your same direction. Trying to flip this over and lining it up might be a little more difficult. So just keeping this. And the foam is flexible. So as you are cutting, don't be afraid to flex the foam. We haven't painted it or anything that would cause any cracking or anything like that yet. So there we have, that piece is now cut on an angle. And with this portion here being cut on an angle, you'll see that now it's going to give you that, that curve around the face. And so what we're going to do is glue these pieces together. But we're also going to look for any places that need additional help. And it looks like right here we have a little bit of too much excess. And we're just going to come back and trim out the bottom. It does look like it needs a little more. We do want this to lay against the face, fairly like we want it to be as close to the characters as possible. So these are just small, minor things that we're doing to make that entirely possible. All right, getting down to it here. Now, anytime you have something like this where it looks like you've got those scissor cuts, you can come in and trim that away, because if you have too many of those chops into the foam is not going to lay nicely, and the glue won't glue nicely either. Okay, so it looks like we have this piece really well managed. Just trim those last little bits away. And we look like we have that done on the other side. That's going to, again, you can look at your pieces. You can look at your registration marks. It looks like they're going to line up really, really nicely. And then you will be ready to glue. So I think that will be something I will do off camera for you guys. And next week when we come back, we'll be ready to paint and start really looking at the rest of the functions here. But for right now, that isn't half bad for our noob Cybot mask. I'm pretty pleased with how this is coming together. I think we should do a test fit, right? What do you think, guys? Show it. There we go. Why didn't I make one before the pandemic? All right, guys, we will be finishing this mask up next week with all of the rest of the stuff. Thank you guys so much. And I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Big news is on the way. 2 brand new sales shows and 2 classic shows are returning to the experience this week. Sign up for our mailing list to learn more.
We know this has been a difficult time for you. We know you are scared. Here at Regenerist Tech we have developed a safe and effective solution to our worldwide problem. Trust Regenerist. We give you back your life.